Hello and welcome back. We're at the Black Sea Security Forum, and I'm now joined by Kurt Volker, of course, Donald Trump's former envoy here to Ukraine. You're also now at the Center for European Policy Analysis. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'm just like to take stock of kind of where we're at. There's been a lot of different panels, a lot of things said here, but you know, one of the things everybody is trying to look forward to is some kind of peaceful solution to this conflict that's claimed so many lives. With the United States peace talks, trilateral, effectively stalled because of the war in Iran, where do you see it moving from here? And the Europeans, could the Europeans have a role to take in engaging the Kremlin?
Okay, so a lot packed into that question. The peace talks, if you can call them that, about ending Russia's war on Ukraine are not stalled because of the war on Iran. They are stalled because Russia has no serious intention of negotiating peace anyway. So they were always a charade, not just because of the war in Iran. They're always a charade.
And do you think the United States is recognizing that?
I think increasingly the U.S. is recognizing that. If you saw Secretary of State Rubio's comments a week ago, it was pretty clear that he says there's nothing happening in these talks. And I think Rubio understands what the problem is. It's that Russia is using them as again, a charade. They're pretending to negotiate while making demands of Ukraine and dangling business deals in front of the United States. So not a serious negotiation at all. And that hasn't changed. Ukraine knows this. Ukraine can see right through Russia's behavior. But they also know they cannot afford to be the party that is not willing to negotiate and not willing to show up. So they take part in every single one of these peace talks, and they take every bad proposal that Russia puts out and turn it into something reasonable. And then, of course, Russia ignores that and moves on. So it's just been a charade, and that's why I think Marco Rubio is saying there's nothing going on here and no progress. Flipping ahead to that, you asked about European mediation or European negotiation. On the one hand, there's nothing Europe is going to do that is going to make Vladimir Putin want to negotiate any more than there's anything the United States is going to do. It's simply not in his interest. He doesn't want to actually negotiate a peace. Doing so would make him look weak because he is conceding something. He's conceding that Ukraine's a sovereign state. He's conceding that Zelensky is a legitimate leader of Ukraine. He's conceding that there's an international border between Ukraine and Russia. He doesn't want to concede any of these things. So there's nothing the Europeans can do. Now, that being said, I would, if I were a European, be putting forward someone to be an interlocutor with President Putin, because right now the only interlocutor is the U.S. envoy. And that U.S. envoy is not going to be taking into account European interests. So I think they need to have their own person, but they shouldn't have any unrealistic expectations about a peace deal. And then finally, so how does this war end? and basically, Ukraine is writing the rules on the battlefield. They're making it impossible for Russia to win anything. They can't take more territory. They can't overcome Ukrainian drones and counter drones. They can't keep their logistics and their fuel supplies going. They can't replace the number of soldiers that they're losing on the battlefield. So this is a long-term decline for Russia in the course of this war. And at a certain point, Putin and the people around him will have to recognize that the longer they keep this going, the more they lose. So they will want a ceasefire. And then at that point, when you can actually have a ceasefire, Ukrainians and Russians will sort that out themselves and get it done.
Okay, let's unpack that part because we've seen ceasefires.
Yeah.
Since the annexation of Crimea. We've seen constant violations of these ceasefires. We did see a ceasefire, the short 3-day ceasefire for the Victory Day parades in Moscow. There was still some violations on the battlefield, on the front lines, but Ukraine held its word. So is that all it takes to get an effective ceasefire? Is if you have political will on both sides, it'll happen? Or is this something that's going to be difficult to control, observe, monitor,
Right.
what have you?
Yeah, you can make it sound as complicated as you want. No question. All that there, monitoring, satellite surveillance, assigning blame, what happens if there's a violation, you can really make it complicated. But the reality is it's pretty simple. If Russia and Ukraine both want there to be a ceasefire and say, okay, we're done, it'll be done. And as you point out, we had such a thing after the initial invasion in 2014, up until February of 22. And it was imperfect. A couple people were killed every week, but there was no movement in the line of contact, and there was no full-scale invasion. And Ukraine was surviving and prospering and doing okay. I think that this time around, after the degree of destruction, and after the demonstration of Ukraine's own long-range military capabilities, this ceasefire would actually be better than that ceasefire. It would be more complete, it would be more durable. Ukraine will be in a stronger position, so there's a disincentive for Russia to violate the ceasefire and to try to reopen the war. And I think there will be quick movement on Ukraine's economic recovery, development, EU negotiations, security guarantees, coalition of the willing. So it will immediately install some further deterrent to Russia reopening the war.
To get there may be a long road. And actually, I would assume that you're saying that the pressure needs to be so immense on Vladimir Putin domestically, on the economy, on basic, on himself.
Yes.
Okay, so how do we get to that point? Because I also see a risk of them maybe going beyond what they can actually endure.
Oh yeah.
Could there be a situation where they deny the ultimate trouble that they are in economically and with their oil infrastructure and what have you, to where they overextend themselves, the Russians, and everything falls?
Well,
sort of like the collapse of the Soviet Union.
yeah, I would argue that is their default setting right now. That's what they're doing. It just hasn't gotten that far. But that is certainly what they're doing. They are beyond unsustainable when it comes to the war economy in Russia rather than a civilian economy, the state finances, which are in deficit. They're having to sell gold in order to get hard currency, in order to keep paying for things. The fact that they have more soldiers taken off the battlefield by Ukraine than they can put on through recruitment, they're already in that zone. But because it's an authoritarian government, Putin can impose this on the Russian population, and they can't do much about it. And he can do that for a while. But even Putin is going to start hitting limits as to what the Russian state can sustain. And if he goes too far pushing the Russian state, then you really do have the possibility of collapse of the state, which I don't think Putin wants. I don't think the elite in Russia want. So you have to think that they're going to stop before they get there. But we're on that trend line now, as that's where this is headed, unless they stop.
In order to get there, Ukraine relies now on the Europeans for funding, for the government, for their military needs for the next 2 years.
Yep.
Are we missing a window of opportunity by not making certain choices in Europe, in the United States, about the economic pressure that we are exerting on Russia?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And could we hasten to the end of this war much quicker?
Absolutely. And we could have hastened it in 2022 and 2023. We could be hastening it now. For example, there's no reason to be exempting Russian oil from sanctions if it's being transferred at sea. It doesn't have any impact on global oil prices, but it does have an impact on Putin's finances. So there's no reason to do that. We have had stalled in the Senate for over a year legislation that would put pressure on secondary transfers of oil and gas, so that we have secondary sanctions on entities that do that, or secondary tariffs. That would be impactful if we did that. The European Union has set a date of the end of 2027 for getting off of Russian gas. That should be accelerated. So we are missing a lot of opportunities to speed up the end of the war by squeezing Putin's finances faster. We're just not doing it.
Well, perhaps more pressure by the people of the countries that inhabit Europe on their politicians can make that happen quicker. But obviously, we're going to be coming up with some elections next year and could throw things into imbalance once again.
Well, they could. They could. Poland, I have to say, has played a leading role in a couple of ways: defense spending, logistics. Support for Ukraine's military through a logistics chain. They've weathered drone incursions. They've advocated for stronger air defense. So Poland has done a lot, and I don't see much change in Poland's direction on this. But you mentioned there's going to be elections in France, elections in Germany a year or two down the road. We'll see what happens in the UK. So we don't know where those trends are headed. But you're absolutely right. The sooner we put more pressure on, the sooner the war will end, and that will be a benefit to Europe. So we should just plow ahead with that.
Definitely something everyone's looking forward to. Kurt, Volker, thank you very much for speaking with us. I very much always appreciate your insight. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And that concludes this discussion here from the Black Sea Security Forum. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.